Men, do you ever feel like you just can't get ahead? Like you're misunderstood? Like you have no one to talk to that truly hears you?
And women, are you often frustrated, hurt, and saddened in your relationships with the men in your life?
What if there were a community of like-minded men going through the same challenges that would support, hear, and understand what you're going through?
Working together in unison to create understanding, intimacy, and strong connections. That's the Way of the Illuminated Warrior.
Way of the Illuminated Warrior Talk Show is a forum of candid conversations for men and women about men. Being a man today is not always easy. Until now.
All righty. Well, it's been a minute since my brother here, David, and I have had a conversation. So we're going to be talking about an important topic today, known as Freedom Day, Jubilee Day, Celebration Day, most commonly known as Juneteenth, which is the celebration of the Emancipation Proclamation that was granted back in 1865, read to the African-American enslaved people and granting freedom. So I'm going to let my brother David here take off with that and tell us what's been happening in your world and your relationship so at Juneteenth.
Okay. Yes. So it's David 11. I got a whole lot of different names, but we're going to stick with my artist name, visual artist David 11. So this year, 2024, it just seemed to be very important to me because it's an election year. We're about to have a whole lot of things dealing with how you perceive your freedoms. So Juneteenth is the holiday. It actually is the name of June 19th. That was the day that we found out 2 years later that we are free. So Florida has an emancipation. Every state has one. So apparently they traveled throughout all the states, letting everyone know, free your slaves. So now that is the actual day that this happened. Freedom Day is a term that comes about for us celebrating it. Freedom Day, you get it? So this year on Saturday the 15th, we celebrated it, though the actual event is the 19th. So on Saturday, down here in South Florida, we celebrated Juneteenth, Freedom Day, and I had an exhibit called Freed Hands. So it was a series of drawings of hands, actually, just me drawing hands out of shackles, in handcuffs, or without handcuffs, random hands. But what was so special about it, here recently I became the president of the Library Friends Group, the library. We promote literacy, right? So I had to use this opportunity to spread a little bit of culture and history at the same time. And what I did was I allowed the children to draw hands. Children automatically wanted to outline their hand. Right. I said, no, we're not outlining and we're not tracing. We drawing today, y'all. We drawing. What do you have? I tricked them. I said, you got 4 fingers and a thumb. Because everybody said, you got 5 fingers. I said, no. So, I made it a fun event at the library to have a drawing class. I then took the drawings from the library to the outdoor event that we had as far as the celebration. So imagine my art being represented along with an art class. Then I went from there with my art, left the art class behind, and put it in the museum that I work at. Beautiful. And that was also amazing because culturally, the museum has a stigma of being a plantation, actually. So it's called a Sample McDougal House. If you want to research that, it's a historically preserved house. And I have to tell Black people that it's historically preserved. Whatever was going on in the early 1900s, that was then, this is now. So I put freed hands in that museum. And then I did oral recordings. So I allowed the people to do a survey. Tell me which one of these pieces you like the most of my pieces. And I'm going to get that piece for you in a second.
Yeah, I'd love to see it, man.
Right. And then we did our oral recording. What is freedom to you and your family in the 21st century? It was a conversation, man, because, we well out of slavery at this point. You even said the date 1865. So we pushing up on 300 years, close to, almost. But we got dates saying that the first slave came to Virginia in the 1600s. Then imagine you're freed in the 1800s, and now it's the millennium of 2000. So what is freedom to you? And I recorded that. Honestly, art just makes a safe place. You get me? Like looking at art, critiquing and reviewing makes it a calm conversation. And I knew that. That's my whole social engineering, bro.
Yeah.
I knew that because when can you get whites and blacks to get together and talk about some slave stuff? You don't really like, I don't know if I'm even comfortable talking about it. So Freed Hands exhibit did that in Florida this year.
Love it.
And I'm kind of proud of that, man.
Yeah, man. So I'd love to see some of the Freedom Hands work, man.
Yeah. Well, here we go. Now, this is what I encourage the students to try to do. Just different variations of how your hands can move. I don't know how good you can see that.
Yeah, I can see it. Yep.
So that was my interpretation of how you could draw hands. This isn't sign language or none of that. This is just the different gestures and movements your hands can make. So I would encourage them to do that. And that turned out pretty good. I had to force them to not outline their hand. But yeah, so on the survey, out of all these other pieces, this one right here won the survey. Can you see that?
Yeah. So tell me about that.
So
holding the key.
This one I called No Locks. And then I said to people, once you enter, at that point, it becomes magic. The key is kind of like some Harry Potter vibe, you know, it's a flying key. And then this actual symbol here in Catholicism, that's the blessing symbol. So what I meant by no locks and having a key, what do you think of? What does it mean to have the key?
Yeah, doors are open. You could come and go as you please. It's freedom.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then another question I asked, what is freedom without access? You know, access to banks. I don't know. Access. What
Not
is freedom
truly freedom. If you don't have access,
Right.
is it freedom? Not really, right? If you don't have full access, and then it's kind of like limited freedom, right?
For real. Yeah. Like it's not freedom at all. So this was the winning piece out of 12 pieces. This came in first, and it's one of the smaller ones. I had bigger ones.
So did you get feedback from the kids? Did they give you what was their feelings, and why did they choose that? Did they tell you?
That was the adult sit down because I had to make it an event. So it was adult sit down, and then I did an oral recording with that. It just was on display for the kids, but they liked it. All of them wanted to touch it, you know that. So I was like, no, don't really touch it. But I did explain to them, listen, your hands is your first friend. Like when you're in the womb, before you even meet your mother, you saying, oh, what is this touching me? You're in the bit, you're a zygote or a fetus. You're like, what is that? And then you look and you're like, this is my friend. And now you can find out you can control this thing. And then when you pop out into the world, you got your air and your lights, you meet people, and the first thing they do is touch you with hands. That's one of the best feelings because as a baby, you're not understanding your sense of taste, smell, and eyesight, but you know when someone's touching you. Then you develop what does it all mean to, this tastes bad, or I can't see, or I smell something. Then you understand that. But the first thing comes out of touch. And this is what spiritually we always have that analogy. I was touched.
Well, I wanted to ask you, man, like, because you asked the kids and you had a dialogue with the adults, like, what does freedom mean to you?
Basically, freedom is what I was saying that made me ask the question. Freedom is to be able to access those things, you know, access workspace or access, you know, public areas or access, you know, because the direct opposite would be locked up. So access was my answer to the freedom. Yeah. And I think that expression is a heavy thing in freedom as well, because, you know, we always at jeopardy about having the freedom to speak when you want to, or having the freedom to bear arms. All those things that's in the Constitution tells us what our freedoms are. and hopefully everyone's able to respond and act in freedom, Um, yeah, that's basically what I said on that, because I really wanted to tell people that we're calling it Freedom Day, and that's our celebration of it, because I've seen Easter my whole life in April, and so recently we've been dropping it in March. So I'm like, don't lose sight, because Juneteenth is the 19th. As soon as you take it off of that date, see, a lot of times we be forgetting dates really have an energy with it. There's something with the moon and stars going on celestially when your planet is moving. This day, this happened, or annually this thing happens. But we've taken that and we've made holidays. Holidays mean we pretty much chose this time to celebrate what that means, even though it might not be solstice. That always come, and that's symbolic of nature, everything balled up into one thing. So I just wanted to remind people Freedom Day means something. And I felt like Freed Hands is a perfect example of Freedom Day. To break out of that.
Breaking the shackles. Yeah, I hear that. Well, it's interesting. Things. I will say they change. Sometimes they elevate. Sometimes they just go in a whole different direction. Like holidays, it's really holy days. Even if you look at Christmas or Hanukkah or Kwanzaa, like using Christmas for example. So it's or Hanukkah. They're made to be celebrations now, where you give gifts, and that's not what these holidays were actually originally about. They were more holy days, So it's interesting how things like kind of transform, and we just change them the way we would like them to be. I like traditional things, just like you're saying too. Keep the holiday, keep the holy day holy. Respect and honor that date as what it was, because as men that we've scribed history, we change things as we choose to change things. So that's why I like oral history, as long as it's passed down generation to generation to generation, like as close to verbatim as possible, because you've done telephone before, you whisper in somebody's ear, and by the time it gets to the third, fourth, fifth, sixth person, it's totally different, So as history goes, if we don't keep it traditionally what it originally was from the creators of whatever that holy time, space, date, experience was, it changes, and then it loses that energy, as you were saying, like the numbers, like you and I have that 1111, the energy of the 1111. If it was 1112, 1110, it's not exactly the same, right?
No, but it was right. You're right about that. Yeah, and it also morphs things into something different, because you got the date, no matter what day, but people are like, oh no, we celebrating that date on this weekend because it falls on the weekend. So let's do it that on Saturday instead of the Tuesday that it's actually on. So, you're right. People just take it and do what they want with it a lot of times as men.
Yeah.
But,
well, I want to ask you, your perception of freedom. Okay, so you've been on this earth, what, 3.5 decades or so?
Yeah.
Okay, so.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I've been here 4 now.
Okay, yeah. See what happens once you break 40, you start getting senile. Once you break 50 and 60, forget about it. We're not talking about that. But so I just want to ask you, like, your perception of, from when you remember being a little dude to like now, and we'll talk about like freedom. Like, how much have you seen change, and is it a perception of freedom, or do you feel like you really have freedom to go and do and be who you want to be in this country?
Well, this country always puts a cap, a governing on your freedom. But I think that's everywhere. I just think that's everywhere. Because, if you choose to break the law, you got to know that your freedoms are going to be limited. But I think that we are free in our pursuit of happiness, if I could use these terms. Because you can always stop what you're doing. You could always go forth. You could choose to be a vegetarian or not. But you could choose to spend a lot. That has a consequence, as in your credit might not be as good and your freedoms will be limited as far as your buying power. So I think that we are pretty free in comparison to other countries. When I was a child, I didn't feel free because I knew, believe it or not, I knew a lot of 13-year-olds who was able to hang out at 10 p.m. Like, I want to still go outside. But my parents like, boy, you 13. And they was out at 10 at night. I didn't have that freedom, but then I learned it wasn't nothing really out there for a child that hour. So I thank my parents for instilling stuff in me to be able to learn how to compare discipline, not compare, apply discipline to keep freedoms. Because it's ironic, rather, how discipline can make things easier. Let's just talk about physically. You know, you do 10 push-ups every morning. Doing 25 one special day might not be so hard because you're disciplined at 10 already. So, I had to get that instilled in me that, these things like make up your bed, take a shower every day. Like, you might miss a day, but try to get that self cleaned every day.
Free from dirt.
Right. And brush your teeth. You know, there's a lot of people that just lost some of these just standard disciplines. You know, some people go as far as pray every morning and pray before you go to sleep. Those are some things that I just grew up doing, and we have the freedom to do that. I've heard about other countries you persecuted for being Muslim or Christian or whatever.
Yeah.
Fortunately, we can practice all that. You can practice being another gender if you want. You get a little chaotic when you talk about freedom sometimes, but I definitely enjoy mines, and that is that Juneteenth thing for African Americans. That is the day that you could actually celebrate it. It turned into a national holiday, coincidentally, under the Trump administration, and now we're going from freedom in June to independence in July. So culturally, we build in this energy that represents that American flag, man. You know, and Black African Americans exist, and they contributed a lot to this country as it exists on this planet. You know, it's been here since the 1776 is when it became an independent country, and Black African Americans has been here that whole time since you came to the United States.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people are not aware. During the American wartime, the front lines were African American, the Buffalo Soldiers, and the Native Americans. I mean, people of color were on those front lines, which that's not always the way we hear or interpret history, but that is the truth, you know. And they did a lot of times they were volunteering. There wasn't that, they were necessarily just thrown there. They volunteered because they had such, patriotism and nationalism. And you talk about like religious freedom to pray and all. 1978 was the year that they finally allowed Native Americans to actually practice their own, faith and pray in public. I mean, 78, that's not that long ago. They were banned and it was outlawed. They were not allowed to practice their religious beliefs, which I think about that. It's kind of crazy, So, I mean, the country is fairly young compared to, the rest of the world. And, we got a ways to go, that's for sure, But I
always like to prove that fact too. This country is young, man. The country as a landmass, we're not talking about that. We're talking about this organized United States thing. It's really young, and we don't have all the answers. We just trying to fix it with money, but it's very young, man. And our ethics are always put to critique by other nations, But fundamentally, I think that we are fundamentally a good blueprint, because a lot of people don't even subscribe to capitalism and diplomacy and all that. They just like, one man dictatorship, and we doing it this way, or we all get it like this. Even though you work harder, we still got the same plate
Mm.
of food.
Well,
Socialism
what's
or communism.
interesting to not sorry to interject to tie it together. So you look at China or any dictatorship, which dictatorship. I don't think any people really appreciate being under a dictatorship. That being said, you talked about discipline. There is a certain discipline there, and maybe it's because of you're under a thumb kind of mentality and way of
Right.
being. But there's a discipline in China and Japan, some of these countries who are, I'll just say, very prophetic producers. There's an argument that Americans are lazy. And
Yeah,
I could see that, to a degree.
you got a good point.
So it's interesting, how we're kind of molded to be free from doom, to have freedom. What does it actually mean? It's a really interesting question, and obviously, coming from a history and a background of a people being enslaved, there's literal freedom. But even that, if you look at it, it's not that long ago that people were actually property. I mean, you think about that, it's pretty barbaric, and thinking like, could you actually have a manservant or a woman servant and boss them around and be like, you're going to do what I tell you to do? It's very archaic, and it boggles my mind that it wasn't really that long ago that we were actually doing that, and the forefathers of this country had slaves.
Yeah. Yeah, that is, like you said, yeah, those Asian countries, they got the iron fist under that. And you're right. Coincidentally, when we had slavery, we was producing at a massive rate. It's just like them. They produce a lot. And as we came out of slavery, we ended up being contractors to the world. But that is a very good point of observation. And I want to tell you that it's better that on the physicality of what it is. Now, the slavery, you got to do this, or we're gonna slap you on the back and do whatever to you.
More
That's
than a
the
slap,
horrific.
yeah,
Yeah,
a lot
yeah.
more than a slap.
That's the
Yeah,
horrific part. Yeah.
yeah,
But when you talk about the actual dedication, hard work, and grind, that was the most beautiful thing. It just was, again, barbaric to say that your minds, you better do it or you're not getting fed. We're gonna hurt you if you don't. That's whoa. But again, we produced a lot of stuff for the world. One main thing I know is cotton. Um, we did a lot of pineapple, believe it or not, here in Florida. Pineapple was a major crop.
sugar, yeah.
Yeah, we have a little tropic climate. But through it all, it's just a great thing, And I ask myself now, once you free, wow, what do you do? Like, I'm trying to reimagine the past. What do you do? But I found the answers to that. When the African Americans was freed, they end up becoming some of the greatest inventors. I have this long list that I have. I probably should show it to you, but throughout the 1800s, all kind of stuff was just being created, made, and mass produced. And there was a lot of African American inventors responsible for it. And it came out of the United States Patent and Trademark Office. So I said, wait a minute, you're freed in 1865, and all these things happened all through 18, this, all the way up into the 1900s. That is amazing. That is proof that ingenuity and initiative, all that took place once you became free. Because otherwise, you're a machine. You're only good for this purpose while I use you. But once you're open, not closed. So that was a wonderful thing that I found when I found that those dates. And I specifically did a search on what African Americans contributed to the country, how I found it. It just was an eye opener, on how fast this country was developed.
Yeah.
It's just an amazing thing to realize that, because a lot of other countries are still in the 60s and 70s as far as how they operate. So yeah.
Well, you made a really good.
Into
I was going to say, you made a really good point before. You used the word choice, which when you're enslaved, your choices are limited or don't even exist. So having choice, I mean, to me, choice is the most empowering thing that we were granted. You could say by man, but also by creator. We're given choices. To me, that's freedom, to have choices, to choose what we want to do, who we want to be, how we want to show up in this world.
Yeah. That's one thing that as I mentor, I'm trying to tell people, think about it and meditate on how you want to present yourself to the world and how you want that projection to affect, anything that's around you. That's a critical thinking process. People don't understand it. And then people turn it back on me. Like, oh, why you don't cut your hair? Oh, why you don't never, because I wear t-shirts and I'm really casual most times, but I can switch it to the button-ups. Hey, why you don't come looking nice?
The choice.
So I see that it is a choice, right. And then it's a consequence to that too as well, because I know the level of seriousness people will take you if you're not dressed appropriately. Like they're expecting you to be sharp in a certain assemblies. We are here like this. You came a little relaxed. I never come relax. I ain't talking about flip-flops and socks and all that. But I do sometimes would be in a t-shirt and maybe some jeans.
Sure.
I should have been in some slacks.
Yeah, and once again, it's a judgment. I interviewed a Baha'i man of the Baha'i faith, and he said, "What if we were all blind? You couldn't make that judgment on somebody if you're blind. You would only know who I am from our interactions and what you got from my heart. You're not going to look at me, because we all do it. We look at somebody and we make we up and down. We make an immediate judgment, or some might say it is discernment. But we all do that. We form our opinions based on our visual acuity, so to speak. So if we were blind, we would have to know someone from the energy that they're giving off. So once again.
Wow.
Choices. But yeah, before we wrap up, man, what would you like to leave the people with, on Juneteenth, on freedom, on choice?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to have to take that one from you, man. I'm going to have to say, how racist could you be if you were blind? Oh, I'm going to use that. Blind.
Bumper sticker, man.
Judge a person. Yeah. I have a poster. Let me go through this poster. I want to leave you with: dream like Martin Luther King, lead like Harriet Tubman, fight like Malcolm, write like Maya, speak like Frederick, dare like Shirley, think like Garvey, and challenge like Rosa, inspire like Obama, and win like Kamala. I want to just say that. And then, I always give up my little tagline, stay strong, live courageous, and be dangerous. Yes,
Right on, brother.
And one more time, man, not dangerous in the sense of violence, but dangerous in the sense of your skill level is so high, they can't compete. That becomes dangerous when your skill level, your knowledge, your intuition is dangerous. Like, how you can even approach somebody that's a master, So that's what I mean by dangerous.
Right on, brother. Well, it's always a pleasure, man. And, celebrating and wishing you, all the other bros and sisters out there, a happy Juneteenth, happy freedom. And let's just continue to illuminate our paths with love and kindness.
Yes, sir. Thanks again, Waska. Illuminated Warriors, man. Appreciate you for having me on the show again.
Right on, brother.
Visit IlluminatedWarrior.com if you'd like to go deeper and find out more about what's available within the Illuminated Warrior Men's Transformational Community. Tune in next time for more candid conversations for men and women about men on the Way of the Illuminated Warrior Talk Show. Until next time, illuminate your path with loving kindness.